Before mapmakers understood what lay beyond the edges of the world, they marked unknown territories with terrifying sea creatures and wrote, "Hic sunt dracones," here be dragons. But why dragons? Why did ancient Chinese emperors, Norse Vikings, Egyptian priests and Aboriginal Australians, people separated by entire oceans and thousands of years, all revere these beasts? Today, we're beginning an exploration into one of the oldest and most well-known creatures in all of world mythology. Welcome to the mysteries of mythology, the origin of dragons. When you hear the word dragon, what do you picture? If you're watching this video, you're likely watching from the US or UK. So you probably imagine a massive creature with 4 legs, enormous bat-like wings, scales covering its body, and fire pouring from its mouth. Maybe you're thinking of something like Smaug from The Hobbit, or the dragons from the Game of Thrones. That's what most of us imagine today. But what's interesting is that the image is relatively modern. The original dragons look nothing like this. They were serpents, giant serpents. No legs or wings, just massive snakes with scales, sometimes sporting the head of another animal, a lion, an antelope, even features that look almost human. And according to new research using statistical phylogenetics, that's the same scientific tools researchers use to trace genetic evolution and figure out where species came from, dragons may be humanity's oldest continuous myth. We're talking about a story that goes back over 75,000 years, all the way to prehistoric Africa. Think about that for a second. 75,000 years. That's not just before written history. That's before civilization itself, before agriculture, before we built cities or invented the wheel. Our ancestors were still living in small groups, hunting and gathering, trying to survive in a world they barely understood. And even that far back, they were already telling stories about dragons. What's bothered historians and mythologists for centuries is how is it possible that cultures with absolutely no contact with each other, from Aboriginal Australians to medieval Europeans to ancient Chinese dynasties, all developed such remarkably similar creatures? They lived thousands of miles apart, separated by mountains, deserts and seas. Yet somehow, they all told stories about giant serpents, connected to water, chaos, and forces of nature. The word dragon itself gives us a clue. It comes from the Greek word drakon, which simply means serpent. And if you trace it even further back, it comes from the Proto-Greek word derkestai, which means to see clearly or to flash or to gleam. Some scholars think this might refer to the serpent's hypnotizing gaze, the way a snake's eyes seem to stare right through you. Or maybe it describes how scales gleam in the sunlight, catching your eye even when the snake is trying to hide. Either way, the dragon has always been about the serpent, the snake. That's where it all began. So why? Why are dragons universal? Why does every culture seem to have independently created the same monster? The answer isn't simple. It's not just one thing. Instead, it's 3 major theories converging together, each explaining a different piece of the puzzle. First, there's evolutionary psychology. The idea that our brains are physically built to fear and remember serpents, thanks to millions of years of evolution. Second, there are ancient human migration patterns. Physical journeys our ancestors took out of Africa, carrying their stories with them as they spread across the entire planet. And third, there are prehistoric geological discoveries, fossils, volcanic eruptions, and strange natural phenomena that seem to confirm the dragon myths people already believed in. All 3 of these theories work together to explain why dragons appear everywhere, in every culture across all of human history. So let's start with the most primal explanation, the one that's literally written into the structure of your brain. The reason why, even if you've never seen a dangerous snake in your life, some part of you still knows to be afraid. In 1977, the famous astronomer and science educator Carl Sagan published a book called The Dragons of Eden. The book was mostly about the origin of human intelligence, but Sagan put forward a fascinating theory about why dragon myths are so widespread. He suggested that human beings might have a memory of giant reptiles buried deep in our brains. Not a memory from our own lives, but a genetic memory, something we inherited from our ancestors who lived millions of years ago, long before the primates even existed. The famous psychologist Carl Jung might have called this collective unconscious, innate memories that an entire species shares from birth. According to this idea, the dragon has lived deep in our minds since the very beginning. We were pre-programmed to fear it before we even knew what it was. Now you might be thinking that sounds a bit far-fetched, and honestly, this theory has caught a lot of criticism over the decades. But modern science has actually backed up part of Sagan's idea. Snakes are one of the oldest predators of mammals on Earth. 66 million years ago, an asteroid hit the Earth and wiped out dinosaurs. That extinction allowed mammals to spread across the planet for the first time. And as they spread, they encountered a predator that had survived extinction: snakes. Especially constrictors. Massive snakes that could wrap around mammals and squeeze the life out of them. For our ancestors, early primates living in trees and on the ground, snakes became the biggest threat to survival. Other mammals could rely on speed to run away, but primates developed something different, something that would change everything. They improved their vision. Primates evolved to see in color and in 3 dimensions, specifically to detect camouflage snakes hiding in their environment. Our entire visual system, the reason you can see the world in full color, the reason you can judge distances and depth, evolved largely because our ancestors needed to spot snakes before the snakes spotted them. Studies have shown that humans can detect snakes faster than we can detect spiders, faster than we can detect any other animal. We can spot a snake even before we're consciously aware of it. Your brain registers snake before you even realize you're looking at one. That works on younger children too. Kids who've never been taught to fear snakes, who have never had a bad experience of one, show them a picture of a snake and their brains light up with attention faster than for almost any other image. Here's another fascinating detail. When there's snakes in your field of vision, your ability to focus on anything else decreases. Part of your attention automatically locks onto the potential predator. Whether you want to or not, it's not a choice, it's hardwired. And there's more. Humans consistently overestimate the size of snakes. This is a known psychological observation. Our perception of distance and size of objects is influenced by how important or threatening we think they are. See a snake and your brain makes it bigger and closer than it actually is. Your mind exaggerates the threat. Now think about what that means for dragon myths. If your brain is already programmed to make snakes seem bigger than they are, and if scary emotional stories are more easily remembered than boring ones, which they absolutely are, then you have all the ingredients for a story about a giant serpent that will never be forgotten. But there's another theory that goes even further. Some researchers believe the Western dragon, specifically the kind with wings, legs and claws, is actually an amalgamation of humanity's 3 greatest prehistoric threats. The serpent representing snakes, the predatory bird representing eagles and other raptors that could swoop down and snatch prey, and the big cat representing lions, tigers, saber-toothed cats, any large predator that could tear you apart. The Western dragon combines all 3 into one ultimate monster. It has the body of a serpent, the wings and claws of an eagle, and often the head or features of a big cat. Add in that deep evolutionary fear of reptiles, that lizard brain memory Carl Sagan talked about, and you get a creature designed to terrify us at the most primal level possible. So when they told stories around the fire at night, and they tried to explain the dangers of the world to their children, Of course, they told stories about giant snakes. Our brains are evolutionarily programmed to fear them, to remember them, to never forget them. But does that explain why myths are so similar? Not quite. Because while our brains might be wired to fear serpents, that doesn't explain the specific stories. It doesn't explain why dragons are almost always connected to water, why they cause storms and floods, why they require sacrifice, why they guard treasures or kidnap princesses. For that, we need to go back in time, way back to South Africa, 75,000 years ago, where the very first dragon story was born. Hey Mystics, this is Eddie. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the science of dragons, give this video a like, it really helps the channel. So far, we've looked at how evolution shaped our instinctive fear of serpents, but fear alone doesn't explain why every culture created such vivid, detailed dragon myths, or why they took different forms around the world. To answer that, we need to look beneath the ground itself, because sometimes the earth seemed to provide proof that dragons were real. Geomythology is the study of connections between myths and the geology of the region they were originated from. Geomythology is based on a simple but powerful idea. Myths and legends aren't just fiction, they also preserve records of the past. They contain insights into how our ancestors understood the natural world based on what they actually saw and experienced. And geomythology has led to some genuine scientific discoveries. In Australia, researchers followed clues from an ancient indigenous Dreamtime legend from the Aranti people that described a star falling into a waterhole. By taking the story seriously and investigating the location, they found a previously uncharted meteor impact site near Palm Valley in the Finca Gorge National Park. In Hawaii, stories about Pele, the volcano goddess, led scientists to recalibrate their understanding of when Kilauea volcano first collapsed. They'd gotten the timeline wrong. The myths helped them correct it. So what about dragons? What physical evidence might have reinforced these myths? Let's start with the most common that most know about: fossils. There's a Greek myth about a hero named Cadmus who defeated a fierce water dragon. After killing it, he pulled out its jagged teeth and sowed them in the soil like seeds. Scattered abundantly across Europe, you'll find mastodon remains, including their large pointy molars. These teeth are huge, sharp, and if you didn't know what a mastodon was, they'd look an awful lot like the teeth of a monster. Some scholars believe that ancient Greek storytellers crafted the tale of Cadmus after digging up these fossils. The jagged teeth weren't from a dragon, they were from a prehistoric elephant. But to people who'd never seen or heard of a mastodon, what else would they think? Paleontologists have found mastodon bones on the Greek island of Chios, an island that in ancient times was said to have been terrorized by a jagged-toothed dragon. Coincidence? Probably not. And here's what makes this even more compelling. The physical features of dragons from different regions often mirror the fossils found in specific areas. In northern China, fossilized Pliocene deer skulls are commonly found. These ancient deer had enormous antlers. And what do Chinese dragons have? Antlers. Large branching antlers that look nothing like what you would expect in a serpent. In the Siwalik hills of Pakistan, there are legends of dragons with jeweled crests, sparkling crystals on their heads. In that same region, fossils are frequently found with calcite crystals embedded on them. One example is Civatherium, an extinct species of giraffe. Dig up one of those skulls with crystals glinting on its bone and you might very well think you'd found a dragon with a jeweled crest. Different fossils in different places lead to different dragon features. It's like each culture was building their dragon based on the combination of the myth they'd inherited and the physical evidence they stumbled across. But fossils aren't the only geological feature that influenced dragon myths. Fire-breathing dragons might have been inspired by geothermic activity. Volcanoes, hot springs and natural gas vents. Take the chimera from Greek mythology. It was a hybrid creature, part lion, part goat, part dragon, and it breathed fire. According to the legend, the hero, Bellerophon, killed it by shoving a block of lead down its throat, choking on its own flames. The creature supposedly came from what's now southern Turkey, and guess what's in southern Turkey? Natural gas vents that shoot fire out of the ground. Even today you can visit these vents and see flames erupting from cracks in the earth. To ancient people, this would have looked exactly like a fire-breathing monster living underground. Similarly, in western Turkey, there are landscapes that look scorched and burnt, the result of ancient volcanic activity. Greek myths say this land was charred during the epic battle between Zeus and Typhon, a 100-headed dragon. Some versions of the story claim the land itself was scorched by Zeus's lightning bolts during their deadly duel. Volcanic landscapes provided the perfect evidence that these battles had actually happened. And here's a practical modern example of how dragon myths and fossils are still connected. In China, paleontologists often plan their dinosaur digs in regions that were well known for dragon bone deposits. For centuries, Chinese people found large fossils and assumed they were dragon bones. They collected them, sometimes ground them up for traditional medicine, and passed down stories about where to find more. Modern scientists realized these dragon bone locations were actually rich fossil sites. One of the best places in the world for finding dinosaur tracks is called Huanglonggao, which I'm sure I've pronounced incorrectly, but it translates into Yellow Dragon Valley. Different regions had different fossils and different geological features, which is why Chinese dragons look different from European dragons, which look different from Mesoamerican feathered serpents. But they all came from the same source, the same ancient story, just adapted to fit the physical world each culture experienced. So dragons aren't purely imaginary, and they're not purely real. They're a blend, ancient fear meeting ancient evidence. Humanity's oldest story reinforced by the planet beneath our feet. We've seen how our fear of dragons comes from millions of years of evolution, and how fossils and volcanoes made that fear feel real. But the science only explains why dragons feel believable, not where the first dragon story came from. In the next episode, we'll travel 75,000 years into the past to southern Africa to meet the first dragon ever imagined, the rain snake, and see how its story became every dragon myth on Earth.